today we're talking about choosing Earth, and you mentioned in a recent live around coming through the magnetic field, and you were saying you were able to talk about this a bit more now. So I was really keen to jump on and elaborate a bit more about what you could speak about now, and going through that process. And I have a few questions that might evolve as we go through. But I'll just let you jump right in.
Yeah, so I mean, the easiest way to really understand this is like back in the day, you remember they had like floppy disks, and if you got a magnet too close to the floppy disk, it would wipe it.
That's a great analogy.
Everybody's always like, oh no, don't put magnets next to that. Please don't do it. Oh no. It was a whole world, right? Well, that's kind of our consciousness too. It went the same way. But instead of a magnetic wipe being like the whole data stream, it was just parts of it, fragmented parts. And by doing so, it actually created a corrupted structure, because the energy would try to take the codes and figure out what went there, but it wasn't necessarily like the frequency of God that was running it. And so what you would get is you would get the identity of that corruption instead that would try to make sense of the code. And so now you get these beings that come in that have a part of the code it's intact, and then part that isn't, and then part that is, and then part that isn't. And depending on like your own birth date and all these other things, where the planets are, like there's all these different things that would affect the level of wiping and where you would get wiped, so that your fragmented code would never be the same as everyone else, because in every moment, the planet is in a different place in the whole universe than it was before. Yeah, we do circle, right? But we don't really circle, because there's also the cosmic rotation, and there's all these other aspects of it. So we're never really ever going to be in our single lifetime ever in the same moment twice, which means that everyone that was ever born was born differently than the next person that was born, even if they were born in the same moment, but in a different location, because you couldn't be born in the same exact location unless you were literally born in the same exact location, which would be really weird. I don't think that's even possible.
What about twins? I guess they come out at a different time.
It's different. It's a different moment, right? Yeah. You could make a case for the fact that there were multiple timelines overlaying at the time. So you could say that, yes, that is possible, because in an alternate timeline, that something would occur. But even then, the stream would be different. So that wouldn't work. Before I go on a tangent there and just lose everyone, ultimately what I'm saying is that magnetic wipe was very intense, because every time that we come through, we would lose parts of ourselves in fragments. But as we progressed after 1987, that level of fragmentation became less, not more. So everyone that came through required more pressure on Earth instead of up here, because the sky was getting repaired more and more and more. And so there was less of a magnetic wipe that would occur. And then therefore there'd be less gaps, so more consciousness, which led to more consciousness here. But then obviously, if you have more consciousness, you also have almost like a naivety to you, because you believe that everyone is naturally like you until you're proven otherwise. And so you have a gullibility to you, which led to a very unique race that came after 87 that was extremely gullible. And they fell for a lot of very interesting narratives and stories that happened on this planet. Now, this is important too, because like choosing Earth is the topic. And the reason we call it choosing Earth is because you literally chose to come at that time. Because there's a lot of people out there like, oh yeah, I'm in that generation, I'm a victim of being in that generation, all this other stuff, right? No, you chose to come in at that time. You knew that you had the strength and capability and valor and integrity to handle what you would lose and to gain it back, and that you were going to be important in this moment. You knew that. So it's not about a victim. It's about choosing your time and coming in at that moment, and then choosing your next time, coming in at that moment, and being part of the Earth game. And now here we are at the Earth game, at the end of an era, moving into another era. And it's messy. There are a lot of things happening. And a lot of people are like, I would never have chosen this. But you absolutely did. And you will know why very soon. You'll be very happy that you chose this. Maybe not so much the last few years of this, but that is your life. Because so many people have forgotten that they had all this. They're like so focused on this now. And again, that's that pressure, right? That naivety. Without knowing it, you've become forgetful. You've actually forgotten that you had all of this. And you're just focused on this. And what I mean by this is the last 2 years. For most people, the last 2 years are just like all they can think of, all they can remember. It's where all the corruption occurred in their mind. So their neural pathways got broken up. Everything happened in a way that's just causing gaps in their memory. Almost like a magnetic wipe, but it was an artificial one. It was a force that was pushed on us through a signal. Now, is that Wi-Fi? Is that 5G? Is it all that other stuff? You could say that the parts of those have all played a role, right? but you can't say that it's the reason. The reason is because we needed that experience. So we created that experience so that we could remember the wound, so that we could figure out how to solve it once and for all. And if you're here right now, you chose to be here right now because you knew that you had the capability to help with this. So the more that we step away from being a victim to this time continuum and saying, well, I would never have chose this, but actually acknowledge that we did choose this and start to figure out why we chose this, the sooner we can get out of this and into the reason that we really came. And that's what choosing Earth is. It's about stop being the victim and just choosing Earth. Say, hey, I'm on Earth right now. Yeah, I could have been on Venus. Yeah, I could have been on Mars. Yeah, I could have been on Pluto. It doesn't matter. Like whatever planet you think you're from or anything of that nature, that's okay. But in this moment, you're currently on Earth. And there's a reason you're currently on Earth. Choose Earth. Let Earth become the heaven that it can be. Because it really can be, guys. Like we're already headed in the right direction really fast. We're seeing lots of changes occur. We're looking at things that we weren't ever able to look at. Things that have been hidden for a really long time are coming up and being exposed. And we're just like, whoa, I can't believe that's actually happening. But that's important. Because when we actually see what is, we can begin to understand what is, and it will naturally change. And what it changes to is always better than what it was. You see, nothing is hidden in the way that it once was. So you chose Earth when you were up here. So choose Earth while you're down here. By doing so, you come in resonance and you become the solution and you stop looking for the solution in the world.
Yeah, awesome. There's a couple of things, Jason, when you were talking, in our discussions we've had, you know, and I've been talking to you about people in my life that I'm like, I just wish they wouldn't have been in my life. And, you know, turned around to me and said, you've chosen to play with them, you know, and it was the most simplest sentence, but the most powerful sentence I think you've ever said to me, and I've never forgotten it. And it's something I go back to over and over again, but it's a similar context, right? Is that we've chosen everything that's being presented to us. It's how we show up, it's how we deal with it. And, you know, along with all of your videos and your tools, that, you know, they're choosing us to make a choice, or helping us rather, or supporting us is probably a better word, you know, to be able to make a choice, to move through what we need to move through, that density, everything to get to where we need to go to. And we're here for a reason, right? As you said, we're here in this time for a reason. I'm really curious around that. So can we just step back a little bit? Because I get a little bit, I guess I'm just curious around, if we go back to like when you've talked in the past about the fall of Atlantis, and you've mentioned in the past that we came to a point, and I can't remember what year it was, where we were at the same resonance, I think it was, as where Atlantis was. And then whatever happened in Atlantis, where they fell and they weren't responsible with the gifts that they had, we've kind of had to build ourselves back up from there.
Yep.
So during that time, since then, where people have come through, or, you know, humanity beings have come through that magnetic field, they've come through knowing that they were never going to reach the gifts that we have available now. And so again, it was just at that time the process we needed to get to, or were we paying a type of debt, or, you know, how has all that kind of evolved to now, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think it's a little bit of a complicated answer. So I'll break it down into two parts. When Atlantis fell, it fell because it worshipped technology over itself. That's the real reason. Like technology became its god. And if you look, we're having the same thing happening now. We're having this opportunity where we can decide where technology becomes our god or not. And it's a very interesting choice that humanity's making around this. Whether we achieve it, whether we don't, is something that we will all see. The votes are saying the opposite, saying that we are absolutely not going to choose technology as a god because we've learned some very valuable lessons. Also, people are recalling now. There's a lot more information coming through. People are starting to feel a lot more. The reason that the Atlantean thing happened was that there were 3 power sources, 3 of them, and they were treated as gods. And those gods chose to worship technology as a god, which led to the world going towards that concept. And when you worship technology as a god, you become that of a robot. There's really no compassion, there's no kindness, there's no empathy, right? It's just ones and zeros. And ones and zeros are true. Like, I mean, if we want to boil down, like, just look at everything from a programming sense. Yes,
Mhm.
absolutely, that is a real thing. Also, I feel things. You feel things. So can we look at feelings as ones and zeros? Probably. I don't have the brain capacity to even conceive of what that would be, but I think that it's possible that we could do that. Also, why would we want to? If I feel something, it's real to me. Whether it's true or not is irrelevant because I feel it. So now there's something for me to learn about that is true. You see, when we forget that very basic thing, when we forget that everyone has those things, because everyone has feelings. Some of them are more buried than others. Some of them are more on their sleeve, so to speak. They're like on the surface level, but they all have those feelings because that's the internal guidance system that gets us home. We all come in with that, and that can never be taken from you. So when you come and you get magnetically wiped, your feelings are intact. They might be jumbled a little bit, but you still have them. That's why you cry so much as a child. You're screaming out to try to understand the sequences and sounds and really understand things before you forget the things that you remembered, because this world's density does help you to forget things faster. And that's normal. That's all part of the fun of this world. And people are like, well, that's not fun at all. I want to remember everything. No, you don't. Not when you're born. Like, can you imagine living your entire life with full recall? I can tell you, as somebody who had partial recall most of my life, that it's not fun, because you have this wisdom and understanding that can't be applied to anything because no one else has it. And it's not that I'm greater than or anything like that, right? So those of you that haven't seen the moral superiority video, definitely watch that. I chose to come in differently. So I chose to forget a lot of things that other people really wanted to remember so that I could come in with a very unique set of codes, just like you came in with a very unique set of codes, just like you came in with a very unique set of codes, right? We all did. It's not that one is greater than or more than or anything of nature, right? Like, it's just simply different. So because of what I chose, I'd had to let go of other things, which made my life a little bit more difficult in this area than it would have if I had remembered these things. But it was okay. It was part of my process, why I came here. It's why I chose Earth in the way that I chose Earth, which is the next part of this level. That's part 2. But part 1, the fall of Atlantis tore the sky. It actually broke space and time in a way where the actual understanding of God, or whatever we want to call this energy, which you could call the photonic stream if you want, a tachyonic field, you can call it whatever you really want, but really it's the available resource of all that ever was and was created from. Well, it tore space between there. So what happened was, we have this thing called biophotons, which, if you know anything of my work, you know that I love to use this word. It means living light. Well, human beings generate living light. Plants generate living light. Animals generate living light. Really fun fact, we all generate living light unless we're dead, or technology. Technology doesn't usually generate living light. It generates codes that kill living light. That's what we call EMFs usually. Now, they can be repurposed so that they can create living light. This is where our own understanding and divine intelligence comes in. That's another conversation, but it's important to understand. So what we were trying to do in Atlantis was create a greater living light or understanding than this tachyonic field that we understand, and this understanding of where all resources came from. So what occurs when we think we know better is we ended up ripping time and space with improper math, actually. The best way to describe it is, we were using codes and frequencies from another planet on Earth, and it just didn't work out so well. So tear happens. All of a sudden, we now are separated from the greatest resource that we had ever known. And immediately we start to forget because we don't have the resources necessary to remember who we are. And this is important to understand. The resources necessary to remember who we are, because memory is an upkeep thing. If you understand computers, you understand this very clearly. Like, you can only have so much memory, and then that's it. And that costs bandwidth, that costs information, that costs power. All of these things are resources. So as we were separated from the resources that were, we no longer had the memory that we once did, and we call this density. That's what it is. Density is the space between. It's all.
I think that's Jason that's frozen. Let's see if he comes back.
All it is. And that's why all the dimensions.
Yeah, we lost you.
Every single time.
We only got to you talking about the density.
Okay, well, that's the part I'm not allowed to share apparently, so it's fine. Ultimately, when we rebuild our biophotonic fields, when we actually restructure and we resequence, we have the capability to connect into the higher planes. And connecting to the higher planes allows us to re-tap into those resources. But because of the separation, there's a giant gap, right? And so what occurs is we only get so much of that information. And this is kind of almost like corrupted code, because you get some truth here, but it's all jumbled up here, and you have to process it. Well, what does processing cost? Resources. What do we have not infinite connected to anymore? Resources. So what occurs is we end up sleeping. We end up doing things that weren't naturally designed in our human anatomy. And we need the rest. We need to get sick. We need to have these experiences to fix the corrupted code so that we can get the resources necessary to reconnect. This is all life is. Over and over and over again, the same thing. But you see, that's the part that occurred with the fall. So when we reached the point where we were making that point again, where we were like, oh, well, we can make technology our God, or we can, actually grow and find out what we are as a human being, what we really want to achieve. What is it? And humanity kind of started to choose both at a time. They were like kind of pulling apart for a while. They were dividing. And very recently, we began to go like, no, actually, I think we should probably just go this route instead. Now, with that, we also have our biofield strengthening, right? More data coming in than normal, and we're actually processing most of it, which means that our fields are getting stronger and we are growing, and our fields are getting stronger and we are growing. And what occurs when our fields are getting stronger and we grow? When we start to fill in that gap between us and all those resources. And then what happens is eventually we start to punch through that gap, and more information starts to come through because more resources, until eventually we're fully connected. And fully connected individuals have such a strong level of connection that no matter where they are in the world, they're able to cut through and to connect fully. That's the same reason that trees have a capability to connect. They help to modulate the weather because of that. They allow biophotons to emit into the sky acknowledges it and shares the information in the form of water, which is the resource that they need at the time, which allows them to grow. This is what we've forgotten. And this is why we came here. This is why we chose Earth. So that's part one. Really understanding all about that's part one. I'm going to pause here before we go into part two. Is there any questions that you have, Natasha, around any of what I've shared?
No, I think that was pretty clear for me. I think you've spoken about a bit about Atlantis before and some of that, but that just filled in the parts that I wasn't sure of. So I think that was clear to me. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So part two. Part two is really easy. It's learning to live. Not analyzing living, not pretending to live, not all that other stuff, but actually learning to live. And what does learning to live mean? Well, it means learning to have mistakes. Oftentimes people say, I don't want to live because I don't want to make mistakes. And I look at them and I'm like, then why are you here? And it's not an insult, it's a real question. Like, I am utterly puzzled and confused by these individuals when they come to me. If you're just going to take up space and do nothing with your life, why are you really here? I'm not saying this is not a call to suicide or anything like that. It's a real, actual question. Like, what are you doing? You're taking up space, which is a resource. So what are you doing for the balance of that? Because we have to be in fair exchange in the world to have the resources we need to actually grow into who we are. So if you find yourself in a space where you don't want to do that, that's okay. But ask yourself why you don't want to do that and come back into choosing Earth again. Because it's almost always because you believe somewhere something is better. And so you stop choosing Earth. You stop choosing to be part of this. The reason that Atlantis separated and the thing that created the part two of the story is we again chose, and this is very recently in the last few thousand years, we chose to separate from nature. When we separate from nature and we make technology more powerful, more important, what occurs? The sickness, the corruption. Trees can process what we don't understand and hold space for us as a solution in a way that we haven't even scratched the surface of the value of a tree. We haven't even scratched the surface of why in forests it's colder naturally when they're real forests. Do you know that it takes hundreds to thousands of years for a forest to be rebuilt in its proper structure. Hundreds to thousands of years. So if I bulldoze an entire forest and I plant trees from another forest, the same age as all of those other trees, it won't have the structure that it did before. They could be the same exact trees. I could literally specify the exact year, everything about it. But it would be like going in and killing off an entire city and then putting new people in there and expecting them to function as if they had lived there their whole life. Would it work eventually? Yeah. 100, 200, 300 years down the road, people would have forgotten about all of that and they would have created new communities and new ecosystems and the whole thing would have changed. But you see, we forget that nature is very much like that. And so what we do is we cut down these trees and we do all these things that we do, and then we try to plant new trees and replace the thing by doing that. But we're not actually healing the space that we created. And this is the same thing that caused Atlantis to fall. We're killing structure and replacing items. And this is not choosing Earth. This is choosing something else. So how do we fix this? It's easy. Prayer is a powerful thing. Prayer means to introduce structure into something. That's all it is. Every time you pray, seriously, doesn't matter what it is. You could pray to Allah. You could pray to God. You could pray to, I don't know, other things. You could pray a lot of things, right? Like you could pray to the doorknob. It doesn't matter. What you're doing is you're acknowledging through creating a space of intention, which is a form of structure, that something can change, which means you're acknowledging the future potential. So you're actually fixing the space-time by adding intention as a structure. Why is that powerful? Well, we can do the same thing when we plant trees. We can begin to plant trees with intention of, instead of just creating a source for paper or something else, we can create a space for life to grow again. We can set intentions to change the world through planting trees. And we can recreate the destruction that we've created by creating the chaotic space that happens when you create a vacuum, AKA you remove the structure from something. You create chaotic space. It happens every single time. Here's an example. The average house, the moment you build it, you create a magnetic field that doesn't belong there, and it naturally creates a dead space. It works against nature, and it pushes off things and kills things around it. It's fascinating what it does. And it's all it is creating something that is not a natural structure. Now, does that mean it has to? No, because you can build a house with intention, can't you? You see, it's that layer of intention that we've forgotten that creates the structure that allows us to do that. And that's where the real power comes in. When we work with nature, when we work with intention, we don't work in the destructive, chaotic space that we once did. Instead, we begin to come together. We begin to naturally unify because structure naturally fits within structure. It's fascinating. Truth, absolute truth, will exist always as a seed and can grow into any size that we choose it to be. Absolute truth, most powerful thing ever. It's the perfect structure that fits everything. Objective truth, powerful key to unlock absolute truth. But it's an important understanding that you will never be the absolute truth for anything other than yourself. Meaning that your solution will never be the solution. It can be a solution. This is part 2. This is the most important thing that we learned in Atlantis. The greatest lesson ever was that what the mistake was that we thought that we were greater than that understanding of resources and structure. You see, part 2 was the fall of Atlantis. It took time. And in that time, those people that could still remembered what they had lost and began to build something so great that it could bring us back to where we had been after billions of years of information was removed. They were able to build a system that over 18,000 years would allow us to restructure our world back to where it was prior. So we would get the choice again. We believed so strongly in the valor and integrity of the human race that when given the choice again, that they would make a different choice. And you know what happened? We did. We made a different choice. In 2017, we made a different choice. We chose the earth. And ever since then, we've been trying to figure out what is corrupt and helping it to, through intention and love, be rebuilt as something greater. But you can't do that if you're not choosing earth. Be here fully, completely, and understand that it's okay to be chaotic. It's okay to have chaos. It's okay to not understand. This is a journey forward in time and space, not a journey through the past. We're no longer looping, which means for a lot of us, this is all brand new. And it's okay to admit that it's brand new. It's okay to say you don't know what you don't know. I do it all the time. I'm like, hey, I don't know what I don't know. The bed thing that's coming out, man, I am literally sitting there like, I have no clue how to do this at all. I met with a person, I was like, I don't know what I don't know. And I know that I don't know what I don't know at a level that is just blowing my mind. There's so many unknown factors that I don't know what even to start with. I don't even know. I don't know how to do it at all. And the guy was like, if you can answer that, if you can say that out loud, if you can just share that openly, then we can work together. We can get this done. Because I know a lot of those things you don't know, and you know the things I don't know. And together we can do it. You see, that's structure. I know what I don't know. They know things that I don't know. And if I'm open to being wrong and they're open to being wrong, we can have enlightened discussions that get us home very fast. So this is round 2. This is part 2 of the journey to Atlantis, is how do we overcome the wounds of misunderstanding? How do we let go of the shame and guilt that we created long ago when we didn't know what we didn't know, but we thought we did? How do we let go of human arrogance and come back to empathy? How do we allow our feelings to guide us home? And the answer is we live. As messy as it can be, we live. As much of a train wreck as it may look, we live. We learn and we grow and we move forward. And that is the most powerful thing about humanity. We are very creative. We can solve anything, literally anything, when given infinite time. And the greatest thing about all of that is that at our core, at our true core, we have empathy and kindness. So not only can we do that, but we can do it in a way that restructures and rebuilds instead of diminishes and tears down. But we can't do that if we're not choosing earth. We can't. It doesn't work. Because if you're choosing to be anywhere else, if you're choosing to check out, if you're choosing to avoid, if you're choosing anything other than earth, then what you're doing is you're creating chaos. You're sowing seeds of corruption, and you're making it harder for those people that are choosing earth to move forward. So just remember, if you're not choosing earth, then that's okay. But at least be honest about it. Be like, I don't want to choose earth. Earth is doomed. All right, cool, thanks. I don't need to spend time with you. I'm going to work with other people who are choosing earth so that we can actually overcome the chaos and the things you're seeing. That's fine. I don't mind that you're sowing seeds of chaos. It's helping me become more creative. It's okay. We're all part of the same equation, whether you want to admit it and work with me or not, right? But just be honest. Like, if you don't want the world to succeed, be honest about it. There's nothing wrong with that. If you want the world to succeed, be honest about that. Nothing wrong with that either. It just helps us to find each other faster, because the people who hate Earth and don't want to be part of Earth, they're going to group together. And they're going to do everything in their power to make sure that people who do love Earth and want to see Earth succeed fail. And you know what's going to happen? It's going to create a resource for us to be the most creative people that have ever existed. And we are going to succeed on levels that they can't even dream of. Because corruption by its nature can only think small-minded. And they will never succeed. It's impossible for them to. Small-minded individuals have no capability to overcome the infinite imagination of a single person who chooses Earth, let alone an entire race.
Jason, you recently posted about all of humanity voting together for the first time. So that's a really massive thing, right? So we're obviously on the right track moving forward. And has there been more of that? Like, is that becomes an ongoing thing, or is it just for one aspect?
It hasn't. It's not an ongoing game currently. I do think it will be, but that rally moment was enough for both sides of the equation. People who weren't choosing Earth and the people who were choosing Earth, in a single moment, were like, even though I'm not choosing Earth, I'm still on Earth, and I don't really want to see that. So we're all going to agree not to see that. And that was the beginning of the end of duality. And that made me very happy. That's why I celebrated it. The concept, the reason behind it, none of that really matters, because what matters is we unified behind something once. You know what's really cool about unifying behind something once? It can happen again. And it will happen again, guaranteed. And it will happen again more frequently, because for a single moment we saw eye to eye, and it allowed the whole world to change. And I'm so stoked to see like more of those moments in the coming months.
Yeah, it's amazing. Can I just talk a little bit about a slightly different topic, not same but different? What's the baseline circuit count for people now on Earth?
It's a great question. Last time I checked, it was about 12.
Okay.
So I'm assuming we're probably around that same range, because the data point ratio and the pressure that's still going on for some people, it's pretty hard to go beyond that 12 at the moment. So
okay. And in another video you mentioned, just because this about being born and coming through, that children are born with 32 circuits and then they tend to lose them close to 7. Yeah. Are they still being born, or are they coming through at a higher circuit count?
Yeah, they're much higher. It's up in the 40s usually.
Wow.
And again, that's like an average estimation. So there can obviously be children coming in the 60s. It's totally possible. It's just really dependent on that. But the averaging out of it is like around 42. So
that's awesome. And is the reason that the circuit count is rising for the children born into Earth now is because humanity as a whole is choosing, and so therefore those more enlightened beings coming in are able to do so? Like, is it because the energy here is able to support them? Or, you know, I get a little bit, I guess, confused around if the beings are coming in now at a higher, you know, at a higher, sorry, my brain's not firing very well, but, you know, at a higher circuit count, an understanding of their gifts, etc. You know, is that because of where we're at on Earth now, or because we need the support?
Well, I mean, it's kind of a chicken and egg thing, really, if you think about it, because the space between that resource and this world is diminishing until someday, very soon, the resource and this world will be the same thing again. There will be no separation. And as that veil thins and there is more room dissolved until there is no room between them anymore, obviously the amount of misunderstanding that we come in with is decreased. And so our standard value of circuitry is enhanced through that experience. One could say that, yes, they are coming in to help us with that, right? Because they're coming in with more structure than they did in the last generations, right? And so every generation is usually coming in with more structure and more capability and more of a solution than it was prior. So the children that are coming in now are exponentially more amazing than the children prior, is what people would draw as a conclusion. It's like, oh, well, why wasn't I born in the future then? Right? But what people don't understand is it's not a linear progression, it's a circle. So you might be born in the future. You also might have been born in the past to create the room for you to be born today. We can totally go there if we want. It wastes so much room inside of our brains to play those games and to go down that rabbit hole over and over again forever, when all we have to do is live and the answers come to us naturally. So I try not to spend too much time on that anymore. I used to, I loved it. Philosophical, I was like, yeah, let's do philosophy all day long. Let's spin our wheels on things and not ever accomplish anything. It's a great idea. But as I get older, I realized, man, there's so much to get done that if I just think about things and not get things done, I'm not ever going to get the things done that I came for. So why am I going to philosophize? Like, it's better to have content that makes sense, that allows me to move forward and helps others to move forward. And so I kind of stopped really worrying about all that content about like, well, this race of beings is doing this thing, and this race of beings is doing this thing, and it's creating this time continuum line here so that this thing can happen here, and then all these beings can come through this will lead to that. And I was like, or I could just live and let it all happen. And I learned that living and letting it all happen was so much more powerful. And I got out of my own way, and I got out of everyone else's way, and we actually created a better world faster. So what I'll say is it's a chicken and egg thing, because you chose the exact moment you came in, but you could also have chose it for the future version of you to be in at the exact time that it needed to be in, 10, 15, 20, 100 years down the road, right? And also, well, you know that you have children, right? And so the idea is that you could also come in specifically to help make room so that your child could come in so that they could do the thing that you wanted to do so that they could do it better than you because you made room for them to do
I
it.
love that.
You see?
Mm.
And that's where it gets complicated, is there's a sense of personality and ego that occurs in this belief that, well, I have to be greater than, right? No, we stand on the shoulders of giants, and giants stand on the shoulders of us. That's the part that's forgotten a lot of times. You're like, oh, we stand on the shoulders of giants. Right? Great, you're standing on the shoulders of giants. Do you think that eventually you're also going to have people stand on your shoulders? Because if you don't, you're missing the point. They want you to stand on their shoulders, just like you want others to stand on your shoulders, because you're on Team Humanity. You're working together for the same thing. Believe it or not, we all actually want the same thing, a better Earth. We don't know that yet. There's groups of us out there that are like, oh no, I want a bad Earth, but they're actually just creating opposition, which allows us to be more creative, which allows us to solve things faster. So technically they're still on our team. Yeah. Everyone's choosing Earth. Some people are consciously choosing it, others are being dragged towards choice of Earth, but we're all choosing Earth.
Awesome. I might just check some questions soon if you're okay with that. So we have a little bit of time, but I just had one question, if you don't mind, around, so you did the MTVO class on ridges recently. Can I ask, do ridges push on circuits?
So they're different systems,
yeah,
but they are parallel and they do work together sometimes.
Okay, I just was curious on that.
About it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Because I was considering that, whether if the ridges pushed on, I knew it on some of the circuits, because I was thinking more around when we were talking about children getting born with the ridges of both parents, and then also depending on where, you know, how evolved the parents are spiritually as well, can affect the circuit count of a child coming through. Is that understanding correct? Yeah. And so then I was curious around how the parents then evolved the child being born with both a circuit count and ridges, because sometimes when the ridges get pushed on from, like, my daughter to me, it feels like I'm working on a circuit there as well sometimes as well, but I wasn't sure. But the parallel makes sense to me now you've said it. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Cool. What was that? Sorry.
So that's a great question.
Okay. Cool. Cool. So I've just got my phone here, guys. So if anyone wants to post any questions. So someone asked about a video on circuits. So there is, I think, Jamie's posted it, so it's up further.
I love my team. They do so good.
Super quick.
In the comments, they like post up right away. So helpful. And I love my community as well. You guys are awesome. So thank you for always asking great questions. And thank you, my team, for always answering those questions. Just see, that's Team Humanity right there. Like creating greatness every day.
I don't think anyone has any questions. If you have posted them, just post them again.
It doesn't really surprise me. People have been a lot more quiet these days.
Yeah.
Things are just like making so much more sense than they did before.
And I think people are tend to be answering a lot of their own questions, or at least thinking that through.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think more people are choosing Earth than ever have. And that structure that comes with that is answering a lot of questions. Also, we're closer to that resource than we've ever been. Literally, I mean, since the moment that we tore, we've never been closer than we are now. And I think that also answers a lot of the questions. So my goal is eventually, like I said, to become irrelevant, so that I don't need to do these things anymore, because no one needs it. Not a single soul. Everyone is fully intact and capable of tapping into their own understandings fully. I look forward to that day, because that'll just be a lot of planting trees and hugging and hanging out and having great conversations. And that's my heaven on earth right there.
Yeah, amazing. But So it doesn't look like anyone's got any questions. There's just loads of
Awesome.
comments. Another check.
Well, perfect. Shorter
Yeah.
videos are always great.
Yeah, easy to digest. Do you feel complete, Jason?
Yeah, I feel great. Thank you so much for having space and for showing up even though you weren't feeling good. That's awesome.
That was awesome. Thank you. I processed a lot this morning, so thank you for that within myself. Just showing up as well and working through all that came up for me around that was really powerful for me as well. So thank you so much, and thank you for showing up in your time. It's been really great.
Thank you.
Cool.
All right. Have a blessed and beautiful. Love you guys.
See ya.
Bye.